So just a brief introduction to Vashon. He is currently a senior at Columbia College in Chicago. He's studying television production and direction. He has an associate's degree from Kennedy King College. And I first heard about Vashon's work in October when I was in my car, and he came on the radio. And he was doing a radio interview about his project to document the Chicago protests through photographs. And I learned that he had attended 35 protest events around the city, everything from the May 30th protests in response to George Floyd's death to pro-Trump rallies. He'd taken over 17,000 photographs, and he collected 117 of them in a self-published book. This book called Chicago Protest, A Joyous Revolution, which is for sale on Amazon now, and it's also available in 17 of the Chicago public libraries. Chicago History Museum's Research Center is also going to be preserving his photographs, so I hope Vashon can tell us a little bit more about that. And the interview was just so interesting that I thought, oh, it would be awesome if he would come and speak with the documentary corps students. So a few emails later, and we had that set up. So I'm looking forward to the opportunity to talk with Vashon about the work he's done and the advice he has for others interested in doing documentary work. He's been a freelancer with Block Club Chicago. He shot photos for the Chicago Public Schools for a number of years. Curious to learn about his process and his takeaways about jumping right in the middle of this historic moment and helping to shape the story of that moment, and what he's learned about people, about himself, about his city, and about the fight for racial justice through his work over the past year. So Vashon and I talked before today just to plan the event, and he let me know that he had kind of sat through his share of guest speakers and appreciated those most when he really had a chance to engage and get something out of it that he was curious to learn. So we're sort of like minimally planned today. Vashon's going to do a little talking. I have some starter questions, but I really want your all's interest to drive our discussion today. So I think what we'll do is we'll let Vashon speak, and then I'll ask a couple questions. And then if you want to ask a question, just raise your real or your digital hand, and we'll let your questions drive the session. Without further ado, Vashon, welcome.
That was a fantastic introduction. I need that transcript so I can just copy and paste that in everything that I do, because my bio is like 2 or 3 sentences. So
yeah,
that was pretty good. But I'm very excited to be here with you all today and just talk about this idea and process of documenting the world around us and our own stories. Before coming on here, I did ask what you all were talking about, what you were learning, and I just watched that TED Talk, which was brilliant. And it took me a while to watch it because I was taking some notes and going back, and I want to watch it a few more times because there were so many great points in there. And I think that right now we're at a time where people are understanding how important history is, because as you start to chart your own paths and we're looking at what's going on in the world around us, we have to understand where we came from and what our history is like. And there's so many people who have been written out of that history and just not included. So to hear that there's a class where you all are coming together to start the work of writing that first draft of history and charting down your own stories was just phenomenal to me, because I haven't heard of something like this before. So I'm really appreciative of all of you all for taking a stab at this and coming to this course and trying to do this work, because it's so important. And it's just this idea of being a forward thinker. Right now, we live life where it's like every moment is fleeting. Because of this digital age, we of course can take screenshots and screen record and take pictures, but we have that in our own lives. None of that is really being shared out publicly. None of that is in some type of archive. So it really just dies with you. So it's important for us to get out here and try to find work that we can document and share it out, and just realize that we all have that power to do it, because later on, we're going to realize that this is really important. And looking back on just the protests of 2020, and I have some of the photos behind me that I shot, a fact about all those pictures is that will never happen again, ever. Will there be more protests? Yeah, but that time, those people, those circumstances will never happen again. So if it wasn't captured, now all of that work is gone. So we have to make sure that we are uplifting these people by documenting those stories. So people like us who are out here to do this work are important, because as you're going to go on and start to do this more often, you're going to realize that it's not many of us doing this kind of work. And we think that here in Chicago, third largest city in the country, 2.7 million people, there has to be someone doing this work. But then we realize that no. And it's for us to come in and take this and just lead the charge with it. Because when I started photographing protests, which wasn't in 2020, it was years ago, I never expected to be in this position of having to like lead this charge of making this book and documenting this and getting it into museums. But we realized that someone has to do it. And it's that idea of be the change you want to see and go out and make these opportunities happen. And the History Museum was mentioned in the introduction. One of the unfortunate facts about it is when I went there and donated the book, I was told that my book was the only piece regarding the 2020 protests that the museum has. So if it wasn't for that, all of the work that happened in 2020 here in Chicago would not be preserved, and that would just get easily lost. So we're realizing that how can we document the stories, but at the same time, it's like, how can you document someone else's story and be mindful of telling their truth? Because at the end of the day, someone is giving you their story. You are potentially taking it, shaping it into your own perspective, and then pushing that out. So oral history is fantastic because it's exactly what they said. You're not just their words, their dialect, their slang terms, their accents, all of that gets preserved. So just realizing that this is something that we could take outside of just your class and start to help change the fabric of society and what gets written down. And right now it's Black History Month. If we think about all of the figures of Black America, you know about them because someone took their photograph. Someone has a video of them. These figures would not be as prominent if you couldn't see them or hear them or learn about them in that physical form. You would know their name, but you don't know anything else about them. So we have to know that we're going to be someone's ancestors. We talk about our ancestors. Years and years from now, we're going to be someone's ancestors, and kids of the future will look back on us and say, I wonder what people were doing. So what I want to make sure that we're showing to people, especially people of color, is your stories deserve to be told. They deserve to be recorded. This isn't white people's America, right? This isn't just their country. This is all of us. We're all here. We're all, as you know, in some form or fashion, immigrants to this land. So it's like we all deserve to have that written down, but we can't sit back and say, oh, well, someone's going to do it. You have to be that someone. So you have to understand that even in school, and I'm a college student myself, so I sit in classes, but it's like, it's bigger than that. And, you know, you're sitting here with an instructor who has all of this knowledge and is able to give you the tools. But I just really implore you all to understand that this is much bigger than just this course. Your work is going into archives. Make sure that we're taking advantage of this opportunity and we're using this time to really make that progress, because we're writing that first draft of history and we have to be very responsible with it. And I can go on and on about just those ideas and those topics, but I really want to make sure that I'm able to answer some of the questions that you all have that can better relate to what you need. I'm assuming that you all may have looked at some of my previous works just to know a bit about what I've done, but there's a wide range of topics here. So I'll just let some of the questions come in so we can really tailor the discussion.
Thanks, Vashon. Yeah, so maybe how about I can ask a few starter questions just to get people thinking of their questions. So, you know, you started on March 30th as the first set of photos in your book, the photos after George Floyd's murder. And then you went up until September 23rd was the last date. So about 6 months. So yeah, so tell us, like, what was your thought process when you're like, I'm going to go out and capture pictures of this protest? What were you thinking when you went out that first time? Did you have like a project in mind? What made you, you must have been like, you were going out a lot. You went to 35 protests. So at what point did a project begin to take shape, and what was your sort of process of documenting?
Well, I can assure you that this was not a part of the plan.
Yeah.
Back in May, June, July, none of this was in my goals and my list and my schedules. The plan was 2020 was my final year of school as far as a full calendar year of school, 2 semesters. So I was supposed to just ride 2020 out. Everything was supposed to be very smooth, do school. And then we get into our current year where I'm graduating in May. So now I'm thinking about getting full-time work and all of that. So when these protests happened, it just completely threw those plans off the rails. And it wasn't until about September that I started thinking about the book. But in terms of photographing the protests, it's something that I've done, just photographing all things Chicago. And many people who are learning about my work now haven't had a chance to see what I typically do just because of the pandemic. One of the joys of my typical year is photographing all of the parades. So I photographed the Thanksgiving parade and the Magna Lights Festival, the Halloween parades, the toy and game fairs, the football classics, the basketball, all of those kind of events that just shape the fabric of Chicago. And of course, protest is one of them. So when May 30th came around, it was like, I wanted to be active, but photography is my art form, is what I feel most comfortable doing. So I knew that I would be more comfortable and more happy if I went out with a camera, as opposed to just going out with a sign or something, just being like an observer, just someone in the mix. I knew that I had to do it. So I consider like my contribution to the movement, to this fight, the photographs. Also, we're in a pandemic and we've been very isolated. So I just kind of wanted to be around people, which is very counterproductive to stopping the spread of COVID, but I just wanted to get out. And what I noticed was the year, it didn't feel like past protests where it was typically one and done. People come together, there's a big protest that happens, and then you kind of just go on with daily life. Because May 30th was the first one, the next weekend was June 6th, and there was the Chicago March of Justice with 38,000 people. So when I saw that momentum carrying on, I was like, okay, I want to continue to do this. And then I also started to notice a lot over the summer where I was covering protests. You held up the cover of the book. There were no news cameras at that protest. I was noticing that I was the only photographer in some of these situations, or we would start off with a bunch of news cameras, but if everything was going peaceful, the cameras would leave and I would be the last one there. So I felt that, okay, I need to continue this because I'm always thinking of that mindset of this has to be documented. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity. This will never happen again. Someone has to do it. So I took to social media very early on, just continuing the work that I've been doing. And I started to grow this following. And when when you get 10,000 Twitter followers in 2 weeks, it's like, okay, there are a lot of people that are watching me now and that are almost relying on me for this coverage. With some of the protests that I went to, I would be looking on Twitter using the hashtag Chicago protest, trying to see what's going on, but I would see no coverage. And it's like, I think there are people here, but it's almost like in this day of age, if there isn't a picture, it didn't happen. If it isn't tweeted out, it didn't happen. So I see the flyer, but I don't see any coverage from it. So no one thinks about it. No, everyone moves on. And the way that politicians work is they work when they're under pressure. So if you're protesting outside of their home, but no one's talking about it, it didn't happen. No one cares. So you have to start to build up that momentum and lift these things up to a higher level. So that's what kept me going with this. And I covered one protest where the video just went like absolutely viral because people have this, that there's a thing on Twitter where you can tweet someone else's video, but it links back to them. So I recorded one and I think it got almost 3 million views. But what was most interesting about it was like picked up by like a bunch of like Trump supporters and people like that who were talking about the mask, but it was in a tweet that Donald Trump retweeted. So it was like from the palm of my hands in my single tweet, I was able to lift a video up to the cell phone of the president of the United States, just that power alone. So I really wanted to continue with covering this, and the book is out and that's May to September, but I still cover protests outside of that that aren't in the book because they happened after the book was published October 16th, still covering things to this day, and I'll continue to do that.
Yeah, you were saying that you had a huge growth in social media followers. What was that like did you begin to feel like freaked out at all about your reach? And
yeah, don't believe the hype. It is not fun to have a following, because in modern day, when I just had like my small following, I could say whatever I wanted and I can do whatever I want to do and I don't have to worry about anything. And it's like now when you have so many people, I would tweet an opinion, but now I have people on other sides and they're like trolls and people are looking at those comments. So it definitely makes it feel more restricted, but it's great in the fact that people are looking at it, but just the way that news works is like people care about click-worthy stuff. So I cover dozens of demonstrations, and the 37 in the book, there are some of them that got international press coverage, and there's some that no one really cared about. So you like the following's there, but just with the algorithms and everything like that, not everything gets lifted up to those higher places. But that's even more reason why it's important to get it off of social media. You can't say, all right, I tweeted this, it got some likes and some retweets, good enough. I promise you, not a single person on the face of this earth is looking at my tweets from May, June, July, and retweeting those and amplifying those. It hasn't even been a year and it's old news. It's gone. So it's like, how do we make sure that that's preserved? And that's where the idea of the book came about. And some people were telling me to do it, but I was like, no, that's a lot of work. I'm sure someone else is going to do that. I'm fine. I just want to focus on other things. Finish that season of Lovecraft Country I was watching at the time. But it's like, I realized that I had to go ahead and do it. And having this in the book is keeping it relevant, because if I didn't make the book, the work is the same, the photographs are the same, but no one's talking about it. No one cares about it. So it's like I had to pull it off social media because it's more important than that social media post. And having that recorded and just seeing where it can go. So I love to just talk about some of the achievements with the book, because it's like sometimes we think that we have to be working for some publication to do this work. We have to have some type of like pull or clout in that aspect. And it's like just regular everyday people, we're what shapes the news. The news talks about what we talk about. So having this book, which I self-published through Amazon's Kindle Direct Publishing, I was able to get this in the Chicago History Museum and get this in the Chicago Public Library, where now it becomes a historical source. And that was completely independent, without anyone's like assistance or anyone's publication. And it's like, the message in that is not, look at what I did, congratulate me and move on. The message in that is, I did it and I want more people to do it. I'm telling you guys what's happening because I want you all to try this, come out here, document this, because you can go far. And I'm not some person who had like these special privileges. I'm from Chicago, just like everyone that I covered. I'm a college student, just like you guys. I had a class this morning. I have a class at 6 o'clock tonight. So it's not like we are in this separate atmosphere where, wow, like what I accomplished isn't available for you. But it's like, if you don't try, it's not going to be available. If you finish this semester and you don't think about oral history again, you just wrote yourself off. So if everyone in this entire class is going to finish this semester and just stop thinking about this, not carry this torch on, then you all successfully just helped to write out these portions of history that would have been written with your work. So it's like just continuing that idea of noticing that these moments are big, they're fleeting, getting that history down, because people are dying left and right, and all of that history dies with them. And we wish that we could have went back and told those stories. So I tell folks that like no one can tell your story better than you can. So I encourage you all to think about how you can apply that to your own life. So let's say you take a personal assignment and you go out and you interview your grandparents, or just the elders in your family, and you get their stories on the record and you start to just document your own families. We can really help to change that fabric, because their histories are intertwined with others across the city who they've impacted in their lifetime. Great question. I'll answer that and then I'll talk about the putting the book together. With that, one of the major points was those are a lot of legacy outlets. Like we're talking about like the Associated Press and very large corporations. And it's like the perils of that is you are carrying the representation and the reputation of your outlet. So me covering the protest, I'm not covering them as one of the news stations of Chicago. I'm covering it as Vashon Jordan Jr. So if you don't trust me, that's because of something that I personally did. So I'm going out there with the representation of myself and my own reputation. When you start to get with these outlets, it's like, hi, I am shooting for Fox News. And now it's like, I don't care about you. I care about Fox News. I hate Fox News. Now I hate you. So it's like that idea of these outlets. And it's also just like, there are things that I can do that they can't do. I can voice my opinions on things and I can report in a way that where I'm almost embodying the person that I'm covering it. Those are things that just with the ethics standards and journalism practice, you just can't do things. I can put a book together. If I shot those photos for an outlet, I would not be here today because I wouldn't have ownership of those photographs. Someone else will have ownership of those and they can choose how they want to use it, what they want to use it for. So I've had footage over the summer that I gave a news outlet permission to use for a story, and they put it in their archives, and for subsequent stories with vastly different headlines, they're still using that footage. So then it's like, now that's really harming what's going on. So there was a New York Times piece that came out where they looked at all of like the top Fortune 500 companies and they showed you who's in charge. And they went through every single top media outlet and it was owned by a white man. I think it was like one white woman. So we look at the top of the journalists and who's in charge of this, they're still upholding those values. So people want to be covered in a way that like represents them, but they also like want it to be biased. So when that's happening, when people are distrusting the media, when people are attacking photographers, once again, what do we as independents do? Do we say, sucks for them, I hope they got their footage before they left? Or do we say, maybe I can come out there, not attached to anyone, and start to document this? Because if you look at the investigations, they haven't been taking videos from news outlets to do this. They've been taking video footage from regular people on the ground. And I've been able to meet folks all across the country who are doing this kind of work on a larger scale. There's on one guy, his Twitter handle is like his BG on the scene. And he's a independent journalist. And he covered some major moments. If you guys remember the shooting in Kenosha, Kyle Rittenhouse, who shot the protesters, he shot that video. That's his footage of the actual shooting itself. No one captured that but him. And he goes all around the country and he does these as this independent person. So we have to just start to kind of supplement that because, and I don't criticize the media so much as far as journalists because I know that you're responsible for covering all of Chicago. So you can't go to a protest and put a 2-hour piece on TV about this is the entire protest. You may get a 30-second spot or a 1-minute spot, or it may just be a headline. So looking at what journalists can't do and how I can supplement that is one of the ways that I've been able to like start to sow that trust in people where they're knowing, okay, Vashon is coming out here. He's on a live Twitter thread. He's taking photos and he's showing the breadth of what's happening to give people that entire story. And so I go into the book, or you have another question?
Yeah. Well, yeah, no, we can open it up. What questions do folks have for Vashon?
I think with that, what I try to do is represent the entire moment. I always tell people that if you go to a protest, I can guarantee you're going to find someone like this. Like if you want a photo of someone with their fist up in the air, you're going to find that at a protest. So what photo can represent all of that? And I'm going to take this towards the idea of like police brutality and people getting arrested, because typically those are the more controversial photos, people looting, for example. But it's like, it's bigger than the individual. So even in the book, I don't have photos of someone personally looting. Even when I posted those on Instagram when it happened, I blurred out their face because the idea and the act of looting is so much bigger than that individual. Me posting that photo can get used by the police department. That person gets arrested, but like you're missing the point, and it's so much bigger than them. So it's like if there's a protest that get on the scene, maybe an hour or two into it, the police starts to stir up some drama and there's some violence and that happened. I've been pepper sprayed this summer at a protest. I've seen firsthand how they can go from 0 to 100. But in the book, I didn't show any of those photos because my responsibility is to say, these are the organizers. They put this protest together. This is what they wanted. The police department came and sowed conflict, which caused people to get pepper sprayed, people to get arrested. So if I'm just showing photos of that, I'm not doing a service to those organizers because that's not why they were there. So I'm going to show photos of those people coming in peace, coming in love and community because that is what they wanted instead of that outside force coming. So if you think about the fact that people of color are like a minority if we break us off into our own groups, so there are going to be more police officers than protesters. So if the police want to completely derail a protest and cause violence, they can do that. So just trying to make sure that message doesn't get lost. But just to answer your question directly, I think that photos of people doing illegal activities should not be shown. You're not coming there to harm people, to put people in these positions. And of course, that's within good reason. If you go back to the insurrection, people are going to jail because they were on camera. If they didn't have photos of them in that Capitol, the authorities would not be able to find them. So you can say that as people, and they're not protesters, they were rioters, you can make an argument that we should have protected them and we shouldn't have put their images out because now they're in danger and now they're getting targeted. Or we can say that we should have done that because they are causing these violent acts to happen. So that's like just a slippery slope of what you blur out, what you don't. So the standard in news is just like you show everything as is. You don't take those stances to, because if you block out a face of a Black Lives Matter protester, then should you also block out the face of one of the rioters from the insurrection? So it's a lot that people just shouldn't even get into the idea of trying to balance that. So I think it really begins with like, what do you put out? And now that with just the palm of our hands and with Twitter and Instagram and all the social media sites, with the press of a button, we can put something out to the world. So trying to be mindful about that. And I definitely have run-ins this summer where I was at a protest. I filmed footage of like protesters and police officers clashing and there was like violence on both ends. And people were telling me to take it down because it can put folks in harm's way. It can put folks in danger if the police goes back and scrub those videos. So my thought process was it happened. I'm showing it. I'm not reviewing the footage because I'm not trying to disrupt things. But it's like, if I know that that image and that video of them doing that illegal act is not going to help the overall purpose and overall mission, I just won't even leave it out because I know that it won't detract from it. So with the looting, like I said, I don't have any photos of people looting individually, but I do have a photo of a burned down Dollar Tree. And I think that gives the same message, if not a stronger message, than that's that single individual. So starting off with like, what is their story? What is their message? What is their purpose? And how can I best represent that? Instead of this is how it turned out, and I'm going to represent it like that, because think of the idea of like, it's the thought that counts. I saw a tweet of someone trying to make some heart-shaped cookies. So they have the cookie dough in the shape of hearts, but then when cookies bake, they expand, so the heart wasn't there. So it's like, do we take that picture and just say, look at them, they made these terrible cookies with no form? Or do we show that the intention was to make these heart-shaped cookies, and you still want to try to be mindful of their messaging and being appropriate when describing those people? All right, I have my toys. I'm a Canon guy. I started off with Canon. Right now I'm actually using Sony, but I used a 1DX Mark II to shoot this. So high-end, like $6,000 sport camera, that I shot all of those photographs with. And very standard as far as like my lens setup at 70-200, 2.8, using for like those telephoto shots, getting that depth of field in there. And then I had a 24-70 2.8 that was on for a lot of the shots just for that versatility. And I shot these all with one body. So sometimes I may have a backup camera just so I can switch lenses. So 24-70, 70-200 on a 1DX Mark II. So that really helped me with some of those shots that are in that low light setting when people are dancing and running around and just getting all of that. I don't think I have any photos in the book with flash, but then I also had some flash power there just to really get there. But I try not to use a flash whenever possible because it highlights the subject, but the entire background can just be completely dark if it's not lit. And I just really want to show that entire environment. But I can push that 1DX up to 6400 ISO, 12,800, and even further, do a little noise reduction in post, and still have a presentable photo.
Cool. Did you shoot your video using that same setup, or?
All of the video was shot on my phone. I think I used like my 11 Pro Max for that, but all of the video was shot there. And there are actually pictures of me, and they're pretty hilarious to look at now, where I'll be sitting there with like my phone and my camera together. And that's how I was the entire summer. I'm taking photos on live view with one hand and I'm filming with the other hand and just trying to show it all. So there are a bunch of pics of me out there, but I didn't even do that much two-handed shooting. So it's like literally trying to get the photos, trying to get the video, trying to tweet and also get pictures. So it was a lot happening, and I'm happy that I'm able to get a break now, but now I need to get back out in the field. So I have an archive of 17,000 images from the summer that I have on a couple hard drives. And the book is 117 images. So for the History Museum, what we did was we worked it out where right now they're just going to get the 117 images. And I feel like at this point, they've been posted on my social media already. They've been in the book, so they're just out there. So we're going to donate that to them. And they're also going to get some photos from the 2019 inauguration of Mayor Lightfoot. I shot that for the city clerk's office. So those will be donated as well, but it's just those. It's not going to be like a full 17,000 picture archive. And even so, I'm grateful to the museum because they were mindful of that. And that was one of the questions they asked me, like, we want to make sure we're not showing people doing something that's illegal, or they may not want to be identified. So they definitely had that thinking of, let's make sure we're being responsible with these and that we're being generous to people in their privacy instead of just give us all that you got. And the process for putting photos in, if you look at like their collection from the Sun Times, they're very diligent about this. So it's not going to be just an archive of here are a bunch of pics in a gallery, but all of them, they wanted the captions for it, the location information, the time and date, all of that will be there. So folks are able to go off and license the photos in the future. And when I'm dead and gone, I don't want the pics to die with me. So they'll still be in the museum. And this is something that is very rare. I'm going to be the 5th photographer to ever do this, first Chicago born in the museum's history. So it's not often that photographers have these collections that have these photos in there. So I'm really trying to start doing that. I like when I do interviews, and this is my 40th like speaking and press engagement that I've done. When I talk to reporters, I always like to tell them how I got my start into photography. And it was through disposable cameras. Kodak disposable cameras, get it from Walgreens. And there are two things about those cameras that are notable. Number one, you can't see your shot until you take it to Walgreens, wait a few days, get it developed. Nowadays, you take a picture on the camera and I look at it right away. I see if I like it or not. You couldn't do any of that. Number two, you have a certain number of shots. Now you have storage and SD cards and compact flashes, and you can do so much. But my start into documentation was I can't see the picture and I have a limited number of shots. So my guiding principle was always, what is it that's going to best represent what I'm covering? So if I'm going on a field trip and I got 30 shots, I can't just be getting pictures of everything and everybody all over the place because my number is winding down. So I have to think about, okay, if I want a picture of my friend, when is the best time to get that photograph? Because they can only get one of my 30 shots. They're not that special. You get one shot and that's it. So it's like, how do I start to get into that? And that was before I got a camcorder, a DSLR. So that was like really what I thought about. Not necessarily. When I put the book together, this can really be used as a supplement to what news outlets are doing, because I'm not someone who's saying I'm here to replace the media. Local news is extremely important, and the work that they do is tireless work, and it's very important and beneficial work. Some of the protests that I went to was because a reporter talked about it, reported on it, and they went out. One of the things that I didn't do at every protest was get interviews. I didn't really talk to people and get all of that information. That's something that reporters did. So my book is able to just be a supplement to what's already out there and not a direct critique, because reporters sometimes, and this is like one of the issues that I had over the summer, and I was very unapologetic in my tweets, and I would, if a reporter did something bad, I would call them out on it. We would have a discussion about it. We would get that. But the issue wasn't necessarily they were lying, because reporters just don't do that. That just won't make it if you're just doing a complete fabricated story. But I think sometimes I don't think that they were the best in highlighting what specifically was most important and having that context. So I wouldn't even call it a critique. I would just call it, I have these photographs and this is my telling of it. So just like we have 7 news stations that'll come out to a major protest, all 7 of them are giving their own perspective on it. So I'm number 8. So it's just all of us doing that in conjunction. We're all working together to craft the story, because honestly, every single person that went out over the summer can make a book with their photos and their individual perspectives, because you can never have too much history. You can never have too many perspectives to take and put it together. So if we think back to the TED Talk and how the presenter talked about the idea of who was telling those stories and what they're putting in, what they're not pulling in. So you can even look at me and say, all right, it's 117 photographs out of the 17,000. There were some people whose photos aren't in the book. So now, do they get written out of the history books? How do we tell their story? So it's like everyone is working together to supplement that. So I did the best that I could personally do with telling the story and putting out the photographs of what I saw, but there's still way more that's out there. So we're all working together. No one person or entity can fully capture every single detail of it. I was on a roll this summer with like the captions. There's a picture that I have of this couple taking a selfie in like a protest. I think you guys can see this, but they're taking a selfie and there's a protest behind them. And the caption that I wrote was, #1 tourist attraction in Chicago, oppression. And in the book, I wanted to really just leave my opinions out of it and not get too one-sided. So the captions were specifically what happened, what neighborhood, what day, the names of the people, what they were doing. So the photos that you mentioned have really robust captions. And even in the photo of the woman who's holding the sign, "Here's what my kids won't have to be," which is my favorite photo from the book, I put that they just finished doing a swag surf. There's another photo in here where people were dancing, and I actually told you what song they were dancing to. So if you want to go look at the photo and play that song and kind of put yourself into the body of what's happening, you're able to do that, because all the necessary details are helpful. Just seeing them dancing is one thing, but if you know what they're dancing to, it really helps to develop that story. If you know, oh, this is after the swag surf, you can think about the momentum of a swag surf and how you feel after doing that. So I really tried to look at those details, and just what I said earlier about and you see this in the book, some protests have just 2 pictures. Some have 4 or 5 pictures. And it's like every protest, as I said earlier, you can find someone with their fist up. I don't need that shot. You can find someone on the microphone. I don't need that shot. What is it about this specific protest that makes it unique? And the fact that we were sitting outside of that restaurant, this was on the mayor's birthday. They were in her neighborhood. It's crazy. Just to see 20 minutes we're there, and they're chanting and they're dancing, the electric slide is going on and everything. And they're just eating their food, and they don't think about it's like a severe disconnection to humanity. And that's really how to describe it. It's like these people are out here fighting for their lives, fighting to make better conditions for everybody. And you're just sitting there eating your pizza. And you don't think in 20 minutes, let me go out there and join them. I can eat later. Let me go give them strength in numbers. Let me go diversify the audience, because when we see that all races are coming together, that means something. And I took that specific photo towards the end of that 20 minutes when we're starting to leave. I'm 6'4". I promise you, it's very hard to not notice me. I walk in the restaurant. I may be 6 feet away from them, social distance. And as you see, like, she's still eating her pizza. So, like, can you just imagine that audacity? Like, you're sitting there at a restaurant, a photographer comes in and he's looking right at you. And instead of trying to go, okay, I'm on camera, let me do it, you're still eating your pizza. So I just thought that no other photo from that entire protest meant more than showing how we're in the same city. We face the same struggle. All of our streets are not plowed right now. We face the same thing, but folks can still have that disconnection, and they can still look at what you're doing, what you're fighting for, and say, well, that's you, right? That doesn't involve me. And it's like, we have to understand that it involves all of us. We should all get involved. So that photo was I think it's one of the most talked about pictures that people bring up when they're asking about my stuff, because you hear about the idea of it's not enough to not be racist, but you have to be anti-racist, and you have to get involved, and people are not doing stuff. But to physically see that's something you don't see in your day-to-day lives. So I wanted to make sure that those kind of images are what stuck, because I'm almost bringing you into the protest. You can look at the photos and feel like you're there. So I really wanted to make sure that those big moments and this is why it takes someone who's actively thinking about documentation, because no one else went in the restaurant and got that picture. No one else thought this should be documented. So I had that mindset of, let me go in the restaurant and show it from their perspective instead of being on the outskirts. So that's why it takes folks like us to be actively thinking about this, to do the work that the regular civilians won't necessarily think about.